might be a reason for those military failures. Hey, I am Chuck the Bureaucrat, and today I'm going to do something that I don't normally do, and that is I'm going to review an academic paper called Is Military Incompetence Adaptive? That is there some kind of benefit that could be derived from what we might call military incompetence? And the author, Richard Wrangham, who's a Harvard professor who studies humans and chimpanzees and other primates, well, he comes about as close to saying yes as any academic is ever going to get. But before we get too far into this, why does such an academic concept matter to you? Well, I would say that while the future often seems unpredictable, once you start to understand some aspects of human behavior, you start to realize that it is depressingly predictable. And that old joke about colonels not needing their brains after they get promoted to general officer, well, it may be less of a flaw and more of a feature. Anyways, as crazy as it might sound, there is actually a field of research into a topic that the academics call military incompetence. One of the best books on this subject was written back in the 1970s by a guy named Norman Dixon. The book is called On the Psychology of Military Incompetence. Within this field of research, military incompetence is defined as a situation where one group gets into a fight with another group thinking that they're going to win, but they get their ass whipped. Now, why would this happen? You see, the archaeological record suggests that young male primates have been killing each other and hapless bystanders for millions of years. So, military incompetence, at first glance, seems kind of backwards. I mean, natural selection should have killed off all of the incompetent idiots long ago. But that's where Wrangham comes in and suggests two hypotheses about why military incompetence might actually have an evolutionary benefit. And by extension, you, the modern soldier, are probably caught up in this same phenomenon. To get started, Wrangham makes a distinction between two types of military conflict: raids and battles. Now, fans of doctrine are going to have to give him a break because he is not talking in strictly war college terminology. The distinction is that raids are characterized by one side, typically the victims, being unwilling participants in the combat, and battles are characterized by both sides being willing participants. Now, in reality, every conflict is going to have a weaker side, which is going to be the loser, and that side is going to pay a pretty high price for having chosen to fight. In the case of raids, that distinction between the stronger and the weaker side, it's pretty obvious. But in battles where both sides are willing to engage, the question becomes, why would the weaker side choose to participate? Well, the prevailing theory up through sort of the later part of the 20th century was that the political leaders and the generals on the weaker side, well, they were just stupid, cognitively and emotionally deviant in some way that led them to make this mistake. And a number of researchers started cataloging the symptoms of military incompetence: overconfidence, underestimating the enemy, ignoring intel reports, and wasting manpower. But at the same time, evidence started to mount that this battlefield failing was more sophisticated, that it was more than the result of the shortcomings of one person. Researchers easily showed that commanders are generally intelligent, even if they make some bad decisions on the battlefield. Alternately, Dixon argued that the military promotion system favored people who had what he called excessive psychological defenses. These included things like a need for approval, a fear of failure, and an intolerance for unpalatable information. That might sound true to somebody who's living inside the military hierarchy, but an interesting observation is that many of the people who make the decisions to engage in battles are folks who did not go through the military promotion process, for example, kings and politicians. So the idea that the inability to determine that yours is the weaker side, well, it's difficult to pin that on a single person. Towards the end of the 20th century, a new idea started to form, and that is that military incompetence is still a cognitive failing, but it's the result of a collective illusion. Our friends Kahneman and Tversky suggested that it was the result of constraints in decision-making mechanisms. Others pointed to the tendency of human beings to, just be overconfident. And while that overconfidence truly does exist in some very specific cases, follow-on research started to show that overconfidence can disappear in other situations. And so it becomes difficult to claim that overconfidence is this mental failing that leads directly to military incompetence. This is where Wrangham argues that what we experience as military incompetence may in fact be a positive, beneficial trait that human beings evolved in order to deal with conflict. He calls it adaptive self-deception, because in non-military contexts, positive illusions tend to favor success in competition, both for individuals and for groups. See, he acknowledges the illusion, but he argues that it has beneficial qualities. During competition, self-deception can enhance performance by deflecting attention from anxiety, fatigue, and pain. And just keep thinking of that MacArthur quote. On the fields of friendly strife are sown the seeds that on other days and on other fields may bear the fruits of victory. So Wrangham offers two hypotheses on how these positive illusions may, on one hand, provide a competitive advantage, and on the other hand, set the stage for misjudging military situations. First is the performance enhancement hypothesis. That is, that these positive illusions boost self-confidence, self-esteem, and self-respect. By getting psyched up and thinking like a champion, negative thoughts and feelings and stress that might interfere with success get suppressed. And as a result, the individual or group can be more effective at achieving their goal. Wrangham's second hypothesis looks at the effect of these positive illusions from the opponent's side of the battlefield. He calls it the opponent deception hypothesis. Essentially, in conflicts that involve mutual assessment by both sides, an exaggerated self-assessment by one side can convince the other side that they, in fact, have a lower probability of succeeding.
The Americans on this island are not ordinary troops, but Marines, a special force recruited from jails and insane asylums for bloodlust. They got that right.
It's a bluff. But the thing to notice is that in a military context, the cost of calling someone's bluff is extremely high. So bluffing starts off as this very low-cost way to achieve victory, or at least to avoid conflict. But if bluffing is cheap and easy to do, then everybody starts doing it. If you're bluffing, it becomes extremely vital that nobody realize you're bluffing, and as a result, those positive illusions become absolutely core to your strategy for success. But what does this mean? Well, regardless of which hypothesis is true, and honestly they could both be true, the beneficial aspects of this self-deception, these positive illusions, it creates a situation that encourages both sides to overestimate themselves and underestimate the enemy. Both sides will escalate conflicts even though only one of them can win. And when the conflict occurs, the costs, including the cost in human life, is going to be a lot higher than it would have been if those estimates had been accurate in the first place. So, what? Well, don't expect human nature to change. Instead, use it, kind of the same way that a farmer uses knowledge about the seasons to understand when to plant and when to harvest. First, these types of military miscalculations are part and parcel of the human experience. The longer we go without one, the more I fear we're likely to experience one. And second, I'm suspicious that nobody can escape this phenomenon. One of the powerful aspects of Wrangham's insights here is that these behaviors are the result of long-standing evolutionary benefits that nobody can run away from. You can't analyze your way out of it. You can know that it's going to happen, and generally how it happens, but you can't stop it from happening. And this leads to what I think of as the most practical takeaway from all of this. We get a choice. Do you want to plan and prepare for the inevitable miscalculation that's going to put us in a desperate spot? Or do you want to wait until things are completely out of hand to try to figure out what you should do? Personally, I believe in preparation. If you can't get out, get in, and personally, I think it's better to be a staff sergeant the day that the balloon goes up than it is to be a buck private a year and a half into a disastrous war. But that's me. I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are because I'm confident that you have ideas I haven't even thought of. And in the meantime, watch this video to see why I think that the year 2034 bears careful watching.